Hello there, this is Mrs. Scoville, and today we are going to be doing the basics of cellular respiration. We are still in Unit 5, which is flow, matter, and energy. We have 3 objectives for today's lesson. The first is, well, really this could be out of different order here, but to explain how photosynthesis and cellular respiration are related to each other, explain what a calorie is, and to be able to list out the 3 main stages of cellular respiration, really, and say how much ATP goes with each one. Alright, so starting out here, cellular respiration, it's a process in which glucose, it can be other sugars as well, but glucose is the primary one, where glucose is going to come into the cell and be the major energy source. So this is going to be the major energy source because glucose and these other sugars will be broken down, and in the process of them getting broken down, that will produce ATP. That process by which glucose and the sugars are broken down is called cellular respiration. And now, respiration sounds like respire, sounds like breathe. This is going to be a process that is going to require oxygen. I've got a little picture here just kind of showing you a little bit about cellular respiration. You can see here we have a little, it's kind of like a little prairie dog, which I really like. And this little prairie dog, obviously it's an animal, so it has to do cellular respiration. That's the only way it's going to be able to produce ATP. And it will get that by eating plants and getting the glucose from plants. So, as you may recall, the plants are going to make glucose when they do photosynthesis. So that's going to be in our chloroplast. Cellular respiration is going to happen inside the mitochondria, which we'll get into more. And it says video, but we're not going to watch one. Okay, so the animal has to eat the food in order to get energy. When we talk about energy and food, it's going to be counted in terms of calories. So if you've ever heard of anybody being on a diet, they're always counting calories. Well, really, this is kind of strange to think about, but a calorie has a very specific definition, and that's the amount of energy it takes to raise the temperature of 1 gram of water 1 degree. Well, that in itself doesn't seem to mean much, but if you start to think about it in terms of food and how much energy the food has, it makes sense. So 1 gram of glucose, which we're talking about glucose because that's the primary energy source talked about in cellular respiration, has 3,811 calories. So that's quite a lot of calories in 1 gram of glucose. And a gram, if you think about when we weigh out in lab, is not very much. A gram of fat has 9,000 calories. So that's why they say you should limit fat in your diet because it has a lot of energy stored in it. So this is sort of a weird way to think about it, but this is a little visual here. 5 pounds of spaghetti, that's enough to actually power brewing a pot of coffee. If you ate a piece of cherry cheesecake, that actually could power a light bulb, a 60-watt light bulb for an hour and a half. And this is even weirder, 217 Big Macs could, again, the energy stored in the bonds, could drive a car for 88 miles. So just really kind of strange, but in food there is that much energy stored. Alright, so thinking about what organisms are going to be performing cellular respiration, we kind of saw it a little bit in the other slide, but I did want to point out to you here that this is not a process that only animals can do. Plants are able to do cellular respiration as well. And this is because it happens in the mitochondria, and anything that has a mitochondria is going to be able to do respiration. In plants, it's a little bit more of a streamlined process because they make the glucose themselves and then they can immediately break it down inside their cells. Cellular respiration, just like photosynthesis, has an equation. And so I've already said here that it has glucose as an input. You have to have the food input to break down. And I mentioned already respire sounds like breathe, so this is going to require some oxygen. So those in fact are our 2 reactants, glucose and oxygen. The products that are going to be made are carbon dioxide and water. So when you breathe out, you're breathing out carbon dioxide. You also breathe out a little bit of water vapor, which is why actually breath can seem kind of almost steamy, which is kind of weird to think about. If we said this in words, it's really just glucose is broken down in the presence of oxygen to make CO2 and water. So for us, oxygen is absolutely required in order to do cellular respiration. I do want to point out a little something to you here. Cellular respiration, obviously this is a new equation we're seeing. We've already seen photosynthesis equation. If you look at them, they're exactly opposite. So our reactants of cellular respiration were our products from photosynthesis and vice versa. What we produce in cellular respiration is then used in photosynthesis. So these processes are exact opposites, and really together they're going to form a cycle. So again, just one more way to look at this in terms of reactants and products. Just a reminder, going into our plant cells are going to be carbon dioxide and water. Those are inputs for photosynthesis, and coming out are sugar in the form of glucose and oxygen, which is a waste for the plant cell for the most part. And in our animal cell with cellular respiration, we're going to have oxygen come in and sugar come in. Again, the animal has to eat to get that sugar input. It's just not randomly jumping into the animal cell. It has to come from food, and again, sugar in the form of glucose. That will come into the mitochondria, and then water is produced as really excess there, and carbon dioxide is waste, which is why we breathe it out. This does give energy to the cell to keep it going. And then as a reminder, we're here in photosynthesis. The energy input comes from sunlight, and it's in the chloroplast. So it's just kind of a quick overview, reminding you of the inputs and outputs of photosynthesis, and also seeing how they relate over here with cellular respiration. And then this is just looking at it one more time to really drive home the reactants and products relationship. So we know that photosynthesis is going to produce glucose and oxygen. Those are absolutely required in mitochondria to get it started. So again, those are reactants in mitochondria, in the mitochondria, and that will produce ATP, which we'll see in just a second how many ATPs, and that ATP is going to be the energy currency still. This is also going to produce heat to keep the body warm. If you think about people, we have a very set body temperature. That heat is going to come from cellular respiration. Again, this process does occur in the mitochondria. In the process of doing cellular respiration, water and CO2 are waste products, and those are absolutely required to get photosynthesis going. Photosynthesis has to have CO2 as an input in order to make glucose and water. So you can see this is cyclical. This means that plants depend on us, and we depend on plants. Absolutely. All right, and our final thing for today, which we'll get into a little bit more into the next lesson, but just to have the basics today, there are 3 steps that make up cellular respiration, and we'll go into each in more detail in the next lesson. But it is going to happen in kind of discrete steps that make different amounts of energy in the form of ATP. So the first step of cellular respiration is called glycolysis, and this is going to make a total of 2 ATPs. The second is called the Krebs cycle. It has a second name called the citric acid cycle, so I said AKA here, and that will make another 2 ATPs. The final step in cellular respiration, again, has 2 names, so they have to make it a little bit confusing here, is first it's called oxidative phosphorylation, or another electron transport chain. So we saw electron transport chains in photosynthesis. This one's going to be similar, and we'll see that as well. This one makes the most of the energy that you see in cellular respiration, which is 32 ATPs. We did say that oxygen was an input or a reactant in cellular respiration, and I bolded steps 2, the Krebs cycle, and step 3, really the electron transport chain, because those 2 steps directly require oxygen. Those are the steps that need it. And then overall, this process can make up to 36 ATPs from 1 molecule of glucose. So there's a lot of energy stored in that glucose. Overall, that is our lesson for today. Make sure that you write your complete summary and answer the practice questions.